let's get into it. What's going on, guys? We're going to get into some stuff here. Tinfoil Speedo on right away. But let's get into some stuff that Candace was talking about. Now, in the past couple of episodes, she's talked about like military connections to certain things. And then she talks about this plane that is pretty much following turning point around. It's landing in the same places that these turning point events are happening, and it all looks very odd. Now, what I'm going to do is, because Candace talks about this stuff, but there is a little background to all of this. And when I say background, I should say this has happened before. This is not the first time that someone, and it's funny that people have compared Charlie to MLK, because it's not the first time that something like this has happened. And we're just going to go through that. So I'm going to be touching on Candace Owens and what she has to say here. Then we're going to jump into MLK's background, Malcolm X's background. And then we're going to touch on something from Laurel Canyon era. If you don't know what that is, I'll explain it to you when we get to it. But let's start off with the Candace stuff, and then we're going to get into some really interesting stuff.
Because you really start to recognize certain patterns when you look into who people's fathers are, who their grandfathers were, who their great-grandfathers were. And the one thing that has shocked me about Charlie and Turning Point USA is just how many military characters were surrounding him. Even in September 10th, people that were in the hospital, right? Let's just take a look at the chart that we have put together. And this is in an early phase, but it's interesting at the very least, okay? We've got Frank Turek, and Frank Turek, if we want to go through this, we got Andrew Colvett, Rob McCoy, Mikey McCoy, Tyler Boyer. Let's start with Frank Turek, if we have that card. And Frank Turek, again, has been honest, former officer in the U.S. Navy, and then he turned to Christian apologetics. He has 2 sons that are in the military, fly planes, as well as one of his son's spouses that's in the military. Again, he's never lied about this. Andrew Colvett, by the way, if you don't know, I didn't know. I don't think Charlie knew. Certainly not when Tyler brought him or when he got hired. His brother, Captain Kurt Colvett, is in the military. His cousin, Captain Robert Colvett, is high up in the military. So that's interesting. Very interesting to me, at least, because I just am like, oh, that's kind of something I was not aware of. I thought he was just a PR guy, someone that was working PR and was found and things, went forward. Obviously, Rob McCoy, another pastor, but a pastor with a very strong military background. Pastor Rob McCoy, his father was a naval captain, Roy Edgar McCoy, but also, and this is kind of shocking, his father was also the assistant chief of staff for psychological warfare in the Navy. Psychological warfare. This is the name of the game. And that trajectory is increasingly interesting to me. I think we have this clip from an investigative journalist named George Webb, who speaks a little bit further about Rob. And obviously, this is Mikey McCoy's family. Take a listen.
McCoy does have this strange military background. He does have this strange, seemingly putting his son in there and guiding the hand for this new apostolic revival. That he is a NAR person. He is the NAR push for Charlie. Charlie was meeting with NAR. NAR were the $25 million and above donors from the Christian right. The Ziklag was the name of the organization. So all that's correct. That's correct information. And
what happened in my life after that was I went from PragerU, and you got a pastor, from the military, 2 pastors from the military there. I'm telling you, Marissa, straight military. I then went to, obviously, the Daily Wire, and the president at the time of the Daily Wire was also a naval intelligence officer who decided to become a pastor. That was John Lewis. And I'm like, actually, in retrospect, what are the chances that we just have so many military people that are in media? How organic is this? Who's the biggest person on YouTube? Right? I just got interested. I started asking questions like, are we in a military simulation?
So I just want to say quickly, it's interesting because I've talked about this before, and I've talked about it on interviews I've done, one with Polarity, where I was talking about how you can be a part of something and actually not realize that you're a part of it. That is something that happens. Candace is actually a perfect example of that. She's talking about she went from PragerU and this person was that, and it all seemed very odd at the time. And she just didn't realize it. She didn't realize she was a part of something, and she was probably going to be a major cog in that machine. She a major part of it just because of her talent with speaking and, the way that she can inspire people, move people, etc., influence people. So she was a part of it and just didn't realize. When she was running around with Charlie, she was a part of what she's talking about right now and just didn't realize. It's kind of mind-bending because it makes you think. I actually came funny enough, I came to this conclusion based on myself, because when I think, I encourage thinking, and I really get out there with my thinking, and I'm like, I wonder if that would be possible if I was a part of something and I didn't know it. Like, what would that seem like? It was just like a little thought experiment I was doing. And it was because I used to do podcasts with my wife, and she was off camera, but she would always be giving me all this information. And then people would make a joke in the comments and they'd be like, "That's your handler." And I feel she kind of is. I mean, she's my wife, right? She's making breakfast right now. I mean, she's handling things. But the people would always make that joke, "Oh, we can't see her because she's your handler, et cetera, et cetera." And, I just jokingly went down the thought process of like, how would that look if people were around you that were associated with things and you just didn't know? And you were just living your life and you kept advancing and getting more subscribers and more views and more notoriety and more access just because people were just around you moving things along and you just didn't know. I think there's a lot of that. I think there's a lot of that in entertainment. I think there's a lot of that in media. I think there's a lot of that in Hollywood. And Candace kind of woke up to it now, but while she was in it, how can you tell? Let's keep going.
Mr. Beast, both of his parents high up in the military. Do you think he really was just getting trillions and gazillions of views because people wanted to see somebody count to 1 million? Or is that interesting, but also it might be relevant that his family's military, like high up in the military? Everywhere I looked, every time I was like, well, this person, I got interested even in Lila Rose, right? Catholic, does this whole, speaks about, and she's always been very lovely to me, speaks about the pro-life movement and converted to Catholicism and got a story there. I met her through Marissa. It's kind of the same people funding both. But it was kind of interesting. Like when I would see Lila kind of jump on the attacking the Christ is King or trying to rationalize why we shouldn't say Christ is King all the time. And she was like the lone Catholic that was doing that. And I then got super interested in her when she messaged me about Tate. And she had someone on her show that was Tate's, one of the accuser's lawyers. And I was like, this has nothing to do with the pro-life movement. What are you doing? I asked her. And she's like, well, and that woman then attacked me and Tucker Carlson. I said, that's weird. Like, that's kind of random. You're supposed to be the pro-life person. And you're talking about, and you're talking to Andrew Colvet's, the party to that lawsuit. You're talking to her lawyer. Why on your show? Why are you the first show she would pick? Why doesn't she go on like CNN or Fox News? And I looked, and of course, yeah, you got military all over that background. And I'm going, is anything not military? I'm looking at Barry Weiss and I'm looking into her grandfather. And there's a story that's just incredible. A bomb thrown on at his house. And I think it's in Philly or somewhere, and maybe it's Pittsburgh. And that's related to the casinos. I mean, the whole thing starts getting really crazy when you realize everyone's somehow attached to Raytheon, right? Mr. Beast, they're all attached to Raytheon in one way or the other. And I find that to be interesting. And there's more, by the way. I'm in the early days of research here, and there's a lot more I'm going to present to you guys. But I think we can all acknowledge that we were lied to about the 30-06, right? I know for a fact Charlie's neck was not destroyed. Certainly was not destroyed. And if I'm lying, sue me for defamation, and you'll learn exactly how I know that. This is what makes Andrew Colvet's tweet explaining the conversation with the surgeon especially interesting. You remember, he's like, oh, and the surgeon said, well, that would have taken down a moose. And, but Charlie's neck, he's the man of steel. And people rightly said that's not the job of the surgeon. That's kind of the job of forensics to say that. The medical examiner would be the right person to say that. By the way, who was the medical examiner? Who were the doctors? And any chance they were military? Any chance they were military? I'm just wondering. And here's what I discovered preliminarily. The answer is yes, okay? The doctor who worked on Charlie was Dr. Lee Trotter. And regarding Dr. Lee Trotter, he did his residency on the Air Force Base, right? He completed residency at the Keesler Air Force Medical Center in Mississippi. I think he actually might be in the Air Force from what I'm looking at. Can't confirm that entirely, but there's a person who matches his name, age, description, living where he's living, who is actually in the Air Force. And he also, for a fact, is a pilot. So it would track that he was in the military. That's interesting. The medical examiner, Dr. Deidre Smith Amaro, who that would be the appropriate person to have had the conversation with, also someone that in my dream, Charlie told me I should look into. She's a major in the Army. She's also from a major corporation. She's from the Erickson family, the Erickson Boyd.
See, and that's actually another reason, just thinking of that. That's another reason why I was taking that thought process with myself, because my dad was in the Air Force. And I was like, that's weird. But I didn't know my dad at all. Like, not really. Like, I feel like I saw him maybe 30 times in my life, So I didn't really know him. But maybe that's how deep it goes. They make sure to distance themselves from you. And I don't know. It's very weird. But there is a lot of this in the entertainment space. There's a lot of these connections that she's making. And again, it's not the first time. And, when I started realizing this is when I first started looking into symbolism in rock and roll, and how, it's like, oh, this is the I love you sign, and that's all this is. But it's like, no, that symbol, like I'm doing it with my hands here. I'm trying not to fully do it. I don't want to do that symbol. But, it's not just sign language for I love you. It's existed longer than sign language has existed. So, there was just a lot of symbolism in rock and roll. And I was like, wow, that's so wild. Like, wow, look at rock and roll and how and then you realize, you start looking at hip hop and you're like, oh, the symbolism is still there. It's still all there. So it's like, this has been going on since what? 1955? All the way to 2025? This has been going on this whole time. So it's not weird to think, you're hearing all of these connections she's making with someone like Charlie and Turning Point, that type of thing has been going on with these, big influential people, civil rights activists since probably further back than I even realize, quite honestly. But I will go over my examples. Let's jump over to the next clip where she...
January 10th, 19th, I'm going to also say that I think this is relevant. Rob McCoy hosts the first ever Turning Point USA Faith Pastors Tour, a vision guiding a group of pastors through Jerusalem. On February 20th, I think this might be relevant because the same people that infiltrated or hostilely took over James O'Keefe were involved with Turning Point USA. James O'Keefe was the founder and the president of Project Veritas, and he and Charlie and myself all met at the same time in November. That David Horowitz Freedom Center event that I was telling you about. James O'Keefe was really young, so we all kind of came up in this movement together and have always been very defensive of one another. So on January 20th, there's this like hostile takeover, what appears to the public at least is a hostile takeover of Project Veritas. James O'Keefe gets pushed out. He's ousted from the board of his own company, and Charlie publicly announces his support for what he perceives, like the rest of the world perceived, was a bit of a hostile takeover. Okay. February 21st, we now have BND. Okay, it flies into St. Louis, Missouri, and it lands at 2:38 p.m., and it's going to stay until May. The blue one you're going to see stays longer when it arrives, and then the yellow one will come behind it. BTT will come behind it, okay? So on February 25th, BTT comes in. And BTT, again, they're both flying from Cairo every time, typically through Paris, and it then lands in St. Louis, Missouri. So he is announced that he is going to be heading up. Rob McCoy is obviously now the co-chair of TPUSA Faith. He brings on Sean Foyt, presumably. And on February 28th, Sean Foyt it's announced that he's going to be heading up the Kingdom of the Capital Tour. So he becomes the face of this Turning Point USA Faith Tour. So, and of course, the first event that they do, as I just mentioned to you, that plane gets to St. Louis, Missouri, and Sure enough, Sean Foyt is there. TPUS Faith is there. They are at the Capitol and they're doing this event. Okay. So interesting. I went, okay, that's kind of interesting. Let's keep going. Now I'm just going to scroll through this because this is timeline one for myself because it's going to keep building everywhere that Charlie is speaking, everywhere that Charlie is speaking. Let's look at March 24th, 2027. I'll tell you why this is interesting to me. On April 1st, we have that plane. We're going to call it the yellow plane for the sake of this timeline. The yellow plane flies from Cairo, always via Paris, to St. Louis again, and it lands in Missouri. And guess what? April 2nd, TPUS Faith, co-chaired by Rob McCoy, kicks off their tour with an event headed by Sean Foy in Jefferson City, Missouri, the very next day while this plane is here. Okay? Let's keep going. Okay. April 6th, it leaves and it always goes through Delaware when it leaves and goes back to Cairo. Okay. Now I am just kind of putting down for you here again, other places where Charlie's here, where he is, because I know that this is going to build into my timeline. You know, I'm looking and Sean Foy is in Israel related to some more faith stuff. I don't know if Turning Point sponsors that trip or not. That's why I put a note there. Charlie is speaking in Sacramento on the April 13th. Yellow plane again comes in. This time it flies to Kansas. Cairo to Kansas. And on April 23rd, Sean Foyt heads up the TPUSA Faith Kingdom to the Capitol tour event.
So basically, because I don't want to get into the plane too much, but she's just showing that a lot of places where Turning Point is speaking, that there is also this plane that is a military plane keeps arriving. Okay? And it's very odd. But again, this is not the first time stuff like this has taken place. Now, I jumped right in and I decided, who should I do first? MLK. We'll just do MLK first. So MLK, there was a long history of surveillance with MLK. J. Edgar Hoover, the long time, he wanted extensive surveillance of MLK back in 1960. The Bureau justified this with counter intel, claiming concerns about his communist influence in the civil rights movement, which is actually true. They wiretapped King's phone, bugged his hotel rooms, monitored his meetings. They sent anonymous letters trying to intimidate him, including one urging him to, take his own life, which has been publicly made public through declassified documents. So this is true. This is not just being made up. Then also the agency, they were also looking at him as well. They technically barred domestic spying, but there was evidence that they gathered intelligence on King's foreign travels, especially trips to Africa, Europe. Mainly, they were monitoring possible subversion contacts abroad, etc. And then we actually have exactly what Candace is talking about. They had Army intel as well. U.S. Army intel units kept files on King and other activities during the late 60s, particularly protests that grew against the Vietnam War, which is very, Their monitoring increased after King began speaking out strongly against the war in 1967. So yeah, there was a lot going on with King. It's funny that it was in the 1960s. Let me just write that down. 1960s, because that was actually the time of Laurel Canyon. Then I jumped over to Malcolm X. Malcolm X, the same thing was going on. The Bureau was investigating him. This is in the early 1950s. So again, we're going back to the 1950s. King was in the 1960s. Because of his association with the Nation of Islam. They used informants inside the Nation of Islam, recorded Malcolm's speeches. And again, I say they had people on the inside, right? They're saying informants. Candace is not using the term informants, but you can just use this interchangeably as people on the inside. That will make sense on Candace's side and this side. J. Edgar Hoover personally ordered agents to gather information to neutralize him as a black national leader. Thousands of pages from the Bureau later released under the Freedom of Information Act. We could go down further. NYPD, they were monitoring him pretty heavily. Let's keep going here. Other intel interests, really quick. The agency kept watch on him, international activity, especially, again, his trips to Africa and the Middle East, where he spoke before organizations from newly independent nations, declassified State Department cables show that U.S. officials were worried about his influence abroad, monitored his movements, etc. So yes, they were both being monitored the same way. Now, I'm actually going to go over to this because I had a whole list of things with what Candace was talking about. Now, this is, I'm going to jump around a little bit because you see Nate Dogg on the screen right now. Nate Dogg's not from the 1960s, but there was this whole thing, Laurel Canyon. I'll get to that as we move down. But there was this whole thing where they were talking about, oh yeah, let's go all the way up. Yeah, there we go. So I'll start at the beginning anyway. So back in the 1960s, like these were prominent groups in the 1960s, and they all had military connections as well. You just went up way too far. Why'd you go up so far? So here. Okay, so the Doors, Jim Morrison's father, George S. Morrison, was a naval admiral. Okay, Frank Zappa, and I know this is going to hurt some people's feelings, of course. Frank Zappa, his father, reportedly worked for U.S. Army's Edgewood Arsenal, chemical biological weapons research. David Crosby of the Byrds / Crosby, Stills and Nash. McGowan claims that Crosby came from the elite military intel family, his father having links in that domain. Stephen Stills grew up in Central South America in places tied to U.S. clandestine operations. Papa John Phillips of the Mama and Papas attended U.S. Naval Academy. Family had Marine ties, military school background, of course. Jackson Brown, born post German War, on a U.S. military base. Also, J. Cole, if you know about music today, J. Cole was born on a German military base as well as famous comedian Martin Lawrence. A lot of people don't know that about Martin Lawrence. He was actually born in Germany. I believe it's West Germany. Him and J. Cole actually born on the same military base. I want to say Frankfurt, but I'm not 100% sure. Miles Copeland Jr., musician and businessman who was one of the founding members of the agency. His children include drummer Stuart Copeland, went into military. Like that's just like so on the nose. Like this guy's in music and he becomes one of the founding members of the agency. That's just very interesting in and of itself. Stuart Copeland, son of he was a drummer in the police, grew up in Middle East foreign postings due to his dad's intel work, of course. Leroy Anderson, a musician who served in the U.S. Army Counterintelligence Corps during World War II and worked in military intelligence. Again, all these people went on to have very, very, very famous careers in the music industry. Walter Loving led Philippine band, also worked in military intel during World War I. Like it just keeps going on and on and on. And then I tried to go into today and I wanted to find out the connects to today. Ice-T served in the military before becoming a major rapper. MC Hammer performed in the served in the U.S. Navy. He served for 3 years, discharged honorably. We have Nate Dogg enlisted at 17 in the U.S. Marine Corps, ammo specialist, which is wild to think of. Nathaniel Hale was his real name. I didn't know that. Cannabis. If you don't know about the rapper Cannabis, you might remember Cannabis. He would be like, Cannabis, like he rapped like that. But he was a rapper. You can look all these people up. He was in the U.S. Army, enlisted after rap success, served 2 years. Some unusual aspects. Freddie Gibbs, if you don't know about him, he's like a new rapper, just a straight up like gangster rapper. U.S. Army, pre-trial enlistment, enlisted in a diversion program, short list before discharge. And when I'm showing you this, you're saying like, oh, but these guys all served short little stints and whatnot. The thing is that they served these short stints and then became these big artists. And that's what Candace is touching on here, is that they serve and then they go on to this other world. And then when you look at, and we're talking about hip hop now, they served as something that actually helped tear down the Black community. It's very interesting the way that works, because your mind, subliminal, subconscious, I'm just throwing out words here. Your mind, very susceptible to subliminal messaging into the subconscious. So if you're hearing something like, I don't even want to, I can't even make any rap lyrics up, but take the worst rap lyrics and play them on rhythm and play them on repeat, and that's going to pierce into the mind of the person that's listening to it, almost in a ritualistic way, and it will take shape in them. People feel like, oh, you're just listening to songs and those songs have no impact on you. We know that's not true. We just know that's not true at all. Not in a mental sense, not even in a physical sense. I mean, who's listened to a song and gotten goosebumps? It's not just that you're getting goosebumps. It's not that the song is blowing cold air on you. It's because something is happening in your mind that's affecting you on a physical level. And I think it causes people to do wild things. I think they're still responsible for those things. I'm not taking away anybody's responsibility for what they do after they listen to this music. Funny enough, I will tell a little story. I knew this Italian guy. I grew up with him. He was a good fella, I'll say. He's a wild guy. And I remember he went to jail. We knew each other. He's like a family friend. And family friend. He actually touched my mom's belly while I was in there. So he's known me since before I was born. And he loved me, always protected me. Still does. And and he was talking about going to jail for a long time. He went to jail for a long, long time. And then he came out and he remembers what Ice-T was and what Ice Cube was and NWA and all these things. He remembered all of these hip hop acts that he listened to. And when he came out, he's like, Ice Cube's an actor. Ice-T's an actor. He's playing a cop. He's like, he was so disillusioned because he'd been disconnected for so long. And he was just like, this is nuts. He goes, those guys inspired me to do some of the wildest things that I've done. And when I come out, they've all retreated from the lifestyle, and I'm stuck in it, right? Because when you come out of the pen, I mean, you do a long stint in the pen, it messes with you. It's like going to war. I mean, it's wild what happens to you. But he was just so surprised, and he would always talk about that. He'd be like, these guys were fake the whole time. They were playing a game with me. That's what he would say, things like that. They were playing a game with me. They made me think and act a certain way. And again, you don't take away his responsibility. He was doing wild stuff and he did it. But he was like, they were playing some kind of game with me. He's like, if they're like this now, he goes, that means they were never really in that lifestyle. They were never really like that. And that's always stuck with me. Always stuck with me, even before I learned all this stuff. No Malice of the Clips, U.S. Army, served 2.5 years after Ice Cube before his full rap career. JPEG Mafia. Now that's a real new act. I don't even know who that is. U.S. Air Force, served in the Air Force before forging his experimental rap career. We go Mystical. You remember Mystical. If you're my age, you remember Mystical. Well, I get there's so much swearing in hip hop. But he would say, shake it, watch yourself, shake it, show me what you're working with. He was in the U.S. Army, served as a combat engineer before his rap career. I don't even know how to say this name. I'll just say Crisis. U.S. Army, early career beat maker and rapper, served in the Army. So before all of that, he served in the Army. Then we have Donis here. There are just so many of these people that have this type of background. So many. So it's like when Candace talks about this happening with Charlie, I know it sounds nuts, but I mean, this is what happens. I just heard a loud noise and I got a baby, the baby's just a terror right now. It's turned 2, going nuts, That dad ear kicked in. I was like, hold on a second. Uh, but when she talks about this, it sounds nuts. But in reality, this is something that's been happening for a very, very long time. And maybe she's just clicking into it. This is something that I've known about for, I don't know, a couple decades now, that I've been talking about it just with friends and back rooms and whatnot. But yeah, now people are really starting to catch on because, it just becomes more and more apparent. Now, what she's covering is not really apparent. Like, how would you know about this plane? How would you know about these people? But the thing is, it seems like these guys, whoever this is in the background, they make sure that they are in every facet of life, every facet where there's influence. It seems like they're there, right? So hip hop, rock and roll, major influence. And the reason that the 1960s MLK sticks out to me with the Doors is because it said that, and this is real. So in order to discourage people from supporting the anti-war movement back in the 60s, the anti-war movement first looked like guys like Jordan Peterson, like Speaker of the House Mike Johnson. Like, it looked like guys like that. They'd have glasses and they'd be like, this is the reason. Let me explain to you why this is not good. It looked like that at first. And by the time all of these musical acts were done, really penetrating and influencing and swaying people, the anti-war movement was associated and looked like the dirty hippie movement, which was a thing. These guys had long hair, they were on drugs, et cetera, et cetera. Music had a major hand in that happening. And it was because they wanted to do that because they wanted people who were regular people at home, who were just good citizens. They wanted to be able to have them look at the anti-war movement and see somebody who is deplorable, people who they don't want to be associated with. So the fact that they were actually looking into King during that time because of him speaking out about it, and then also changing what the anti-war movement looked like, it just all connects. It's just a thing that they've been doing for the longest time. So I know she sounds a little nuts. But the thing about it is that this has been going on for a very long time, a very, very long time. So, I might go deeper into it. I might do that on Patreon. I got to be honest. I haven't even been putting out links to Patreon. I'm not even finished doing my first video for Patreon. So, again, complete love to everybody who signed up just right away like that. I mean, I'm going to try and make it into something. I'm not going to try and make it just a portal for you to support, because I already have that with Buy Me a Coffee. I already have that with the clothing merch. I want to make that into like I want to make that into a media channel. Eventually, I want to have a website like Candace where it's just you directly to me kind of thing. But this is that Patreon is the building blocks of all that. So thank you so much for anybody who signed up. But again, she's not as crazy as she sounds. This has been going on for a long time. And again, there's no one like Charlie right now. I know Officer Tatum thinks that he's Charlie. Whoever is behind him is like, you're the new Charlie. Go on there, wind up doll. I know that's what people think, but there's no one like him. And it would make sense that these people were watching him sway hundreds of thousands, millions of people every year and thought, we have to surround this guy properly so we can refine or polish and even direct his message. It makes perfect sense that they would do something like that. Perfect sense. I think they do it to everyone. I've even experimented with, like, maybe that's what's going on with Rogan. Maybe that's what happened with Rogan. How would you know? Like, you're just doing the right thing. Like, Rogan has a massive security detail. They're all ex-military. He's friends with the DNI, but he didn't start out friends with the DNI. He was friends with some lady that left the Democrat Party, and he was like, wow, she's really cool. And he became friends with Tulsi, right? He was friends with Jocko, but he was friends with Jocko because he had this he had this fighting background, and they were both getting after it. So they became friends. Him and Goggins, he brought Goggins onto the main stage. Goggins comes from a major military background. They just became friends based on other things. But then the next thing you know, your whole network is made up of these people. And these people have your ear because they're friends with you. So they can get you to talk about certain things a certain way without even telling you this is how you should talk about it. It's just if you have 10 friends, right, or everybody who surrounds you and they're all saying something and you go, yeah, you know what? Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And you're having friend conversations. You're not having interventions where people are coming to see you. You're having friendly conversations. And even you yourself can reach out and say, hey, I know you have this background. So I was just wondering, can I just pick your brain about this subject? Next thing you know, they give you the spiel that you need to know, kind of thing. I don't know. That's just me. I got a tinfoil Speedo. Rarely do I wear pants, so so I just think about these things sometimes, nothing concrete. Everything's tinfoil. Anyway, just wanted to bring that to you. I'm out of here.